Husband jails my lover and takes his retirement money after discovering our affair. Gina and Greg's story begins over a decade ago when they first exchanged vows, embarking on a journey filled with love, dreams, and shared aspirations. At the time of their marriage, Gina was in her late 20s, brimming with youthful optimism and excitement about the future. Greg, a few years older, was a steady presence in her life, offering support and companionship that made her feel secure. Their relationship blossomed quickly, characterized by a deep emotional connection and a shared vision for their lives together. As they navigated the early years of marriage, they built a solid foundation, marked by mutual respect and affection. Together, they welcomed two beautiful children into their lives, a son and a daughter, who became the center of their world. The initial years of family life were filled with laughter, playdates, and the joys of parenting. Gina and Greg reveled in the chaos that comes with raising young children, finding joy in the little moments, family dinners, bedtime stories, and weekend outings. Their home was a lively hub of activity, where love and warmth permeated every corner. Friends and family often remarked on the happiness that radiated from their family, and it seemed as though they had everything they could ever want. However, as the years passed, the demands of parenthood began to take their toll. The couple found themselves caught in the whirlwind of daily responsibilities, juggling work commitments and the needs of their children. While they still shared a strong bond, the intimacy that once defined their relationship began to wane. The late-night conversations that had once stretched into the early hours were replaced by exhaustion, and the spontaneous date nights became a distant memory. Despite these changes, Gina and Greg maintained a sense of love and partnership, often leaning on each other during challenging times. They supported one another through the ups and downs of parenting, celebrating milestones and navigating the inevitable struggles that come with raising children. Before the affair, their relationship was characterized by a deep-seated affection that had weathered many storms. They had built a life together, filled with shared experiences and cherished memories. Their love language was evident in the small gestures. Greg would surprise Gina with her favorite coffee on busy mornings, while Gina would leave little notes for Greg to find, reminding him of her love and appreciation. They were a team, tackling the challenges of life side by side, and their commitment to one another was unwavering. However, as the years rolled on, the pressures of life began to create a subtle distance between them. The intimacy that had once been a hallmark of their relationship started to fade, replaced by a sense of routine and familiarity. While they still cared deeply for one another, the spark that had ignited their romance seemed to dim. Gina often found herself longing for the connection they once shared, reminiscing about the passionate moments that had defined their early years together. Greg, too, felt the strain, but both were hesitant to address the growing chasm between them, fearing that it might lead to uncomfortable conversations. Despite the challenges, Gina and Greg's marriage was not devoid of love. They still enjoyed family outings and shared laughter with their children, creating a warm and nurturing environment. However, the underlying tension was palpable, and both began to feel the weight of unspoken feelings. Gina, in particular, found herself grappling with a sense of restlessness, yearning for something more than the predictable rhythm of their daily lives. It was during this vulnerable time that she would encounter a situation that would change everything. As we delve deeper into Gina's story, we will explore how the dynamics of their relationship shifted and the choices that led to the unraveling of their once happy family life. The complexities of love, intimacy, and the human desire for connection will come to the forefront, inviting us to reflect on the fragility of relationships and the impact of choices made in moments of vulnerability. Join us as we navigate the emotional landscape of Gina and Greg's marriage, uncovering the layers of their journey and the consequences that would follow. Gina's life took an unexpected turn during a seemingly ordinary day at her son's soccer practice. The sun was shining brightly, casting a warm glow over the field as parents gathered to watch their children play. It was a typical Saturday afternoon, filled with the sounds of laughter and the occasional shout from the sidelines. As Gina settled into her usual spot, she noticed a new face among the other parents. Rich, a tall man with an easy smile and an approachable demeanor. He was there to support his daughter, who had just joined the team. Initially, their interactions were casual and friendly, revolving around the game and their children's performances. Gina found herself drawn to Rich's enthusiasm as he cheered for his daughter, his laughter infectious. They exchanged pleasantries, discussing the challenges of parenting and the joys of watching their kids grow. What began as small talk soon evolved into deeper conversations, as they discovered shared interests and common experiences. Gina felt a spark of connection that she hadn't experienced in a long time, a feeling that both excited and unsettled her. As the weeks went by, their conversations became more frequent and personal. They would often find themselves standing next to each other on the sidelines, sharing stories about their families and their lives. Rich was charming and attentive, making Gina feel seen and appreciated in a way that had become increasingly rare in her marriage. She found herself looking forward to these interactions, the anticipation of seeing him becoming a highlight of her week. However, with each passing conversation, Gina also felt a growing internal conflict. She was acutely aware of the boundaries she was crossing, yet the thrill of their connection was intoxicating. Gina's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, she cherished the bond she was forming with Rich. It was refreshing to engage with someone who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. On the other hand, guilt gnawed at her conscience. She loved Greg and valued their family life. Yet the intimacy that had once defined their relationship felt distant. The contrast between her mundane routine and the excitement of her interactions with Rich left her feeling torn. She often found herself replaying their conversations in her mind, analyzing every word and gesture, trying to decipher what it all meant. The pivotal moment came one afternoon after practice when Rich casually suggested they grab coffee sometime. Gina's heart raced at the thought. It was a simple invitation, yet it carried the weight of possibility. She hesitated, caught between the desire for connection and the fear of betrayal. The idea of meeting Rich outside of the soccer field sent a thrill through her, but it also filled her with dread. What would it mean for her marriage? Could she really go through with it? After a few days of contemplation, Gina found herself unable to shake the thought of that coffee date. The allure of exploring this new connection was too strong to resist. She imagined the conversations they could have, the laughter they might share, and the chance to escape the confines of her daily life, if only for a moment. Finally, she made the decision that would alter the course of her life. She texted Rich, suggesting they meet at a cozy cafe nearby after the next practice. The moment she hit send, a rush of adrenaline coursed through her veins, mingled with a sense of impending doom. As the day of their coffee date approached, Gina felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She was stepping into uncharted territory, and the weight of her decision loomed heavily over her. The thought of meeting Rich outside the context of their children's soccer practice felt exhilarating yet terrifying. Would this be the moment that changed everything? Would she be able to maintain the facade of her life while exploring this new and thrilling connection? Gina arrived at the cafe, her heart pounding as she spotted Rich waiting for her at a table. The sight of him sent a rush of warmth through her, and she felt a sense of anticipation that she hadn't felt in years. As they exchanged greetings and settled into their conversation, Gina knew that this was the moment that marked the beginning of her affair. The lines between right and wrong blurred, and she found herself drawn into a world of excitement and danger, unaware of the profound consequences that awaited her. As Gina and Rich continued to meet, their connection deepened, evolving from casual coffee dates to something far more intimate. The turning point in their affair came one evening after a particularly enjoyable dinner at a quaint restaurant. They had shared laughter, stories, and a bottle of wine, and the chemistry between them was palpable. As they walked back to their cars, the air was thick with unspoken tension. In a moment of vulnerability, Rich leaned in and kissed Gina softly. It was a kiss that ignited a fire within her, awakening feelings she had long buried. In that instant, she felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with a wave of guilt. The kiss was both thrilling and terrifying, and it marked a significant shift in their relationship. After that night, Gina found herself swept up in a whirlwind of emotions. The kiss had opened the floodgates to a world of passion and desire that she had not experienced in years. Yet, with each encounter, the weight of her choices pressed heavily on her conscience. She was acutely aware of the betrayal she was committing against Greg and the family they had built together. Guilt and shame became constant companions, shadowing her every moment with Rich. Each time they met, she felt a surge of excitement followed by a crushing wave of remorse. The thrill of their secret rendezvous was intoxicating, but it was always accompanied by the haunting realization that she was living a lie. Gina's internal struggle intensified as their relationship progressed. She would often find herself lying awake at night, replaying the events of the day in her mind. The laughter they shared, the way Rich looked at her with such intensity, it all felt so right in the moment, yet so wrong in the grand scheme of her life. She loved her children and wanted to be a good wife to Greg, but the allure of Rich was undeniable. Each time they met, she felt herself slipping further away from the life she had known, and the emotional turmoil became increasingly difficult to bear. In an attempt to regain control, Gina resolved to end the affair. She knew it was the right thing to do, and she wanted to put an end to the chaos that had overtaken her life. However, the challenges she faced were daunting. The thought of confronting Rich and telling him it was over filled her with dread. She feared the disappointment in his eyes and the emotional fallout that would inevitably follow. Yet, she also knew that continuing down this path would only lead to more pain for everyone involved. Despite her intentions, every time Gina tried to end things, she found herself drawn back into Rich's orbit. Their chemistry was magnetic, and the moments they shared felt like an escape from reality. Rich would often express his feelings for her, making it difficult for Gina to walk away. He would remind her of the connection they had, the passion that ignited between them, and the happiness he brought into her life. Each time she attempted to break free, she was met with his charm and affection, which made it nearly impossible to resist. Gina's emotional turmoil reached a boiling point when she realized that she was living a double life. She would drop her children off at school, put on a brave face, and then rush to meet Rich, all while feeling like a stranger in her own home. The guilt of lying to Greg weighed heavily on her, and she often found herself in tears, grappling with the reality of her choices. The moments of joy she experienced with Rich were overshadowed by the pain of betrayal, and she felt trapped in a cycle of desire and remorse. In a moment of desperation, Gina finally mustered the courage to confront Rich. She met him at their usual cafe, her heart racing as she prepared to end the affair once and for all. As she sat across from him, she struggled to find the words. The connection they shared was undeniable, but she knew it was time to prioritize her family and her own well-being. However, as she began to speak, Rich reached across the table, taking her hand in his. The warmth of his touch sent shivers down her spine, and for a brief moment, she hesitated. The emotional pull was strong, and she found herself questioning whether she could truly walk away. Ultimately, Gina left the cafe feeling more conflicted than ever. The decision to end the affair was not as simple as she had hoped. The emotional turmoil continued to swirl within her, leaving her feeling lost and uncertain. She knew she had to make a choice, but the path forward was fraught with challenges. The struggle between her heart and her conscience would continue to haunt her, as she grappled with the consequences of her actions and the longing for a connection that had become both a source of joy and a source of pain. The day Greg discovered Gina's affair began like any other, but an undercurrent of tension hung in the air. Gina had arranged to meet Rich at their home, a decision that felt increasingly reckless but also thrilling. With the kids at school, she believed it was the perfect opportunity to indulge in their secret relationship without the fear of being caught. She meticulously prepared for the meeting, tidying up the living room and lighting a few candles to create an inviting atmosphere. As she set the scene, a mix of excitement and anxiety coursed through her. She knew she was walking a tightrope, but the thrill of being with Rich overshadowed her better judgment. Meanwhile, Greg was finishing up a long day at work, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of his family. He had sensed a shift in Gina's demeanor over the past few months, but he attributed it to the stresses of parenting and life in general. Little did he know that the woman he loved was hiding a secret that would shatter their world. As he pulled into the driveway, he felt a sense of unease, a nagging feeling that something was off. He brushed it aside, eager to spend time with Gina and the kids. As Greg entered the house, he was greeted by an unusual silence. The atmosphere felt charged, and he instinctively sensed that something was amiss. He called out for Gina, but there was no response. He made his way through the house, his heart racing as he approached the living room. The sight that met his eyes was one he would never forget: Gina and Rich, locked in an embrace, their faces inches apart, lost in a moment that was meant to be secret. Time seemed to freeze as Greg stood in the doorway, disbelief washing over him. The reality of the situation crashed down like a tidal wave, and anger surged through him. "Gina!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. The shock of his presence jolted both Gina and Rich, and they quickly pulled apart, panic etched on their faces. Gina's heart sank as she realized the gravity of the moment. She had hoped to keep her affair hidden, but now the truth was laid bare before her husband. Greg's eyes blazed with hurt and betrayal as he turned his gaze to Rich, who stood awkwardly, unsure of how to react. "What the hell is going on here?" Greg demanded, his voice trembling with rage. The confrontation escalated quickly, with emotions running high. Rich, caught off guard, attempted to explain, but Greg wasn't interested in excuses. The tension in the room reached a boiling point, and before anyone could process what was happening, Greg lunged at Rich, fists clenched. The two men collided, grappling with each other in a chaotic struggle. Gina screamed, desperate to intervene, but the scene unfolded too quickly for her to stop it. The physical altercation was intense, fueled by raw emotions. Greg's anger was palpable as he pushed Rich against the wall, demanding answers. Rich, taken aback by the sudden violence, fought back, trying to defend himself while also attempting to defuse the situation. The sound of fists hitting flesh echoed through the house, a stark contrast to the peaceful home they had built together. Gina felt helpless, torn between the two men she cared about, one representing her past and the other her present. As the struggle continued, Gina's heart raced with panic. She finally managed to pull Greg away from Rich, her voice breaking as she pleaded with him to stop. "Greg, please. This isn't helping." Her words cut through the chaos, and for a moment, both men paused, breathing heavily as they processed the reality of what was happening. The room was thick with tension, and the emotional chaos was overwhelming. In the immediate aftermath of the discovery, silence fell over the room. Greg stepped back, his chest heaving with anger and betrayal, while Rich stood awkwardly, unsure of what to do next. Gina felt a wave of despair wash over her as she looked at the two men, the weight of her choices crashing down on her. The love she once felt for Greg was now intertwined with guilt and shame, and the thrill of her affair with Rich had turned into a nightmare. "Why, Gina?" Greg's voice was low, filled with hurt. "How could you do this to us?" The pain in his eyes cut through her, and she felt her heart shatter. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. The reality of her actions loomed large, and she knew there was no easy way to explain the choices she had made. As the emotional chaos settled around them, Gina realized that her life would never be the same. The facade she had built was crumbling, and the consequences of her affair were now laid bare. The love and trust that had once defined her marriage were shattered, leaving behind a landscape of heartbreak and confusion. In that moment, she understood that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, and the journey to healing would be long and painful. The fallout from Gina's affair with Rich was swift and devastating, reverberating through every aspect of her life. In the wake of the confrontation, Greg felt a mix of anger and betrayal that compelled him to take drastic action. Unable to process the emotional turmoil, he made the decision to press charges against Rich for the physical altercation that had occurred in their home. Greg believed that Rich had crossed a line, and he felt justified in seeking legal recourse. The decision to involve the authorities was not made lightly. It was a reflection of the deep hurt he felt and a way to assert control over a situation that had spiraled out of his grasp. In addition to pressing charges, Greg sought a restraining order against Rich. He wanted to ensure that Rich would not come near their home or their children, fearing that the man who had betrayed his trust could somehow disrupt their family life further. The legal proceedings added another layer of complexity to an already tumultuous situation. Gina found herself caught in the crossfire, feeling the weight of her choices as the legal ramifications unfolded. The restraining order not only served to protect Greg and their children, but also highlighted the severity of the situation, making it all too real for Gina. The impact of the affair on Gina's relationship with her children was profound. The once happy home that had been filled with laughter and love was now shrouded in tension and uncertainty. Gina struggled to maintain a sense of normalcy for her kids, but the emotional fallout was palpable. Her children sensed the change in their mother, the sadness that lingered in her eyes, and the tension that hung in the air. They were too young to fully understand the complexities of adult relationships, but they could feel the shift in their family dynamics. Gina often found herself torn between her desire to protect her children from the truth and the overwhelming guilt of her actions. As the days turned into weeks, Gina's relationship with her children became strained. They would ask questions about why things felt different, why their father seemed so angry, and why their mother was often lost in thought. Gina struggled to find the right words, fearing that any explanation would only confuse them further. The guilt of her affair weighed heavily on her, and she felt like she was failing as a mother. The emotional distance that grew between her and her children was heartbreaking, and she longed to bridge the gap, but the shadows of her choices loomed large. The public nature of the incident added another layer of complexity to Gina's already fragile situation. News of the confrontation and the subsequent legal actions spread quickly through their community. Friends, neighbors, and acquaintances began to whisper, and Gina found herself at the center of unwanted attention. The affair, once a private matter, had become a public spectacle, and the scrutiny was suffocating. Gina's reputation, once built on years of trust and respect, began to crumble under the weight of gossip and judgment. As she walked through her neighborhood, she could feel the stares and hear the hushed conversations. People who had once greeted her warmly now looked away, their expressions filled with pity or disdain. The isolation was overwhelming, and Gina felt like a pariah in her own community. The shame of her actions was compounded by the public fallout, and she struggled to reconcile the woman she had been with the person she had become. The emotional toll was immense, and she often found herself questioning her worth and the choices that had led her to this point. Gina's friendships also suffered as a result of the affair. Some friends distanced themselves, unsure of how to navigate the situation, while others felt compelled to take sides. The support system she had once relied on began to fracture, leaving her feeling more alone than ever. The emotional repercussions of her affair extended far beyond her marriage. They rippled through her entire life, affecting her relationships and her sense of self. In the midst of the chaos, Gina sought therapy to help her process the whirlwind of emotions she was experiencing. She needed a safe space to confront her feelings of guilt, shame, and loss. The therapist encouraged her to explore the reasons behind her choices and to begin the difficult journey of healing. It was a long and arduous process, but Gina knew she had to confront the consequences of her actions if she ever hoped to rebuild her life. As the legal proceedings continued and the emotional fallout unfolded, Gina realized that the path to redemption would be fraught with challenges. She would have to face the repercussions of her affair head-on, not only for herself but for her children and the family she had once cherished. The journey ahead would require immense strength and resilience, but Gina was determined to find a way to heal and rebuild her life, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. The process of separation between Gina and Greg was a tumultuous journey marked by emotional upheaval and difficult decisions. After the confrontation that exposed Gina's affair, both parties knew that their marriage could not continue in its current state. They agreed to separate, but the terms of that separation would require careful negotiation and reflection. The separation agreement outlined the division of their assets, custody arrangements for their 2 children, and the financial responsibilities each would bear. For Gina, the drafting of this agreement was a painful reminder of the life she had once cherished and the family unit that was now fractured. As they sat across from each other, discussing the terms, Gina felt a wave of sadness wash over her. The reality of their situation hit her hard. The love they had built over a decade was now being reduced to legal jargon and financial settlements. Each clause in the agreement felt like a nail in the coffin of their marriage, and she struggled to maintain her composure. The emotional weight of the separation was overwhelming, and she found herself grappling with feelings of guilt and regret. Gina had never imagined that her choices would lead to this moment, and the finality of it all left her feeling hollow. In the weeks following their separation, the dynamics of communication between Gina and Greg shifted dramatically. Initially, they attempted to maintain a civil relationship for the sake of their children, but the underlying tension was palpable. Conversations that had once flowed easily were now fraught with discomfort and unspoken resentment. Greg was understandably hurt and angry, and while he tried to keep the discussions focused on co-parenting, the emotional scars from the affair were still fresh. Gina often found herself walking on eggshells, fearful of triggering Greg's anger or sadness. Despite the challenges, there were moments when they managed to communicate effectively, particularly when it came to their children. They would discuss school events, extracurricular activities, and parenting schedules, but even these conversations were tinged with an underlying sadness. Gina longed for the connection they once shared, but it felt like a distant memory. The emotional distance between them was a constant reminder of the love that had been lost, and she often found herself reminiscing about the happier times they had experienced together. As the separation progressed, Gina began to confront the reality of her situation. She sought therapy to help her navigate the emotional turmoil, and through those sessions, she started to process her feelings of loss. The therapist encouraged her to explore the reasons behind her choices and to acknowledge the pain she had caused not only to Greg but also to herself. It was a difficult journey, but Gina knew she needed to face the consequences of her actions if she ever hoped to heal. The finality of the divorce loomed on the horizon, and as the date approached, Gina felt a mix of dread and inevitability. The court proceedings were a stark reminder of the end of her marriage, and she struggled to come to terms with the reality of her new life. On the day of the divorce hearing, she sat in the courtroom, her heart heavy with sorrow. As the judge finalized the dissolution of their marriage, Gina felt a profound sense of loss wash over her. It was as if a chapter of her life had closed, leaving behind a void that felt insurmountable. In the aftermath of the divorce, Gina grappled with a myriad of emotions. She felt a deep sense of grief for the family she had lost, the dreams that had been shattered, and the love that had once defined her life. The finality of the divorce was a harsh reality, and she often found herself questioning her choices and the path that had led her to this point. The guilt of her affair weighed heavily on her, and she struggled to forgive herself for the pain she had caused Greg and their children. As she navigated her new reality, Gina also began to recognize the importance of self-compassion. She understood that healing would take time, and she needed to allow herself to grieve the loss of her marriage. The journey ahead would be challenging, but she was determined to rebuild her life and create a new sense of normalcy for herself and her children. With each passing day, she took small steps toward healing, focusing on her personal growth and the well-being of her family. Ultimately, the process of separation and divorce forced Gina to confront the consequences of her actions and the impact they had on her life. While the pain of loss was profound, it also opened the door to self-discovery and the possibility of a brighter future. As she moved forward, Gina knew that she would carry the lessons learned from her marriage and the strength gained from overcoming adversity, shaping her into a more resilient and self-aware individual. After the divorce, Gina found herself at a crossroads, determined to rebuild her life and create a stable environment for her children. The emotional turmoil of the past few months had taken its toll, but she was resolute in her commitment to move forward. With the weight of her choices still fresh in her mind, Gina focused on providing for her family and establishing a new routine that would foster healing and growth. One of the first steps in her journey was securing a new job. After years of being a stay-at-home mom, Gina knew she needed to re-enter the workforce to support her children financially. She began applying for positions in her field, leveraging her previous experience and skills. After several interviews, she landed a job at a local marketing firm, a role that excited her and reignited her passion for creativity. The work environment was supportive, and her colleagues were welcoming, which helped ease her transition back into the professional world. As she settled into her new role, Gina felt a renewed sense of purpose. The job not only provided financial stability, but also allowed her to regain her independence and confidence. With her new job came the challenge of balancing work and motherhood. Gina was determined to be present for her children, ensuring they felt loved and supported during this tumultuous time. She established a routine that included family dinners, homework help, and weekend outings, creating a sense of normalcy amidst the changes. The laughter and joy that filled their home began to replace the tension that had once dominated their lives. However, the emotional scars from the divorce lingered, and Gina often found herself reflecting on the past. She would think about the choices that had led her to this point, the pain she had caused, and the lessons she had learned. These reflections were bittersweet. While she felt remorse for her actions, she also recognized the growth that had come from her experiences. As she navigated her new life, Gina held on to hope for the future. She envisioned a life where she could be a strong role model for her children, teaching them the importance of resilience and self-acceptance. She dreamed of a future filled with possibilities, where she could pursue her passions and create a fulfilling life for herself and her family. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Gina was determined to embrace it with open arms. Co-parenting with Greg presented its own set of challenges. While they had agreed to prioritize their children's well-being, the emotional baggage from their past often complicated their interactions. Communication was essential, but it was not always easy. There were moments when old wounds would resurface, leading to misunderstandings and tension. Gina found herself navigating a delicate balance between maintaining a cordial relationship with Greg and protecting her emotional boundaries. She often sought guidance from her therapist, who encouraged her to focus on the present and to communicate openly with Greg about their children's needs. Despite the challenges, there were also moments of cooperation and understanding. They attended school events together, celebrated their children's achievements, and worked collaboratively to ensure their kids felt supported. Gina learned to appreciate the small victories in co-parenting, recognizing that they were both committed to raising happy and healthy children. Over time, their communication improved, and they began to find a rhythm that worked for their family. Moving on from the affair was a gradual process for Gina. While she had made peace with her past, there were still moments of vulnerability that would catch her off guard. Occasionally, she would see Rich in the community, and the memories of their time together would resurface, stirring up feelings of guilt and regret. However, Gina was learning to acknowledge these emotions without allowing them to define her. She focused on her personal growth, engaging in activities that brought her joy, such as yoga, painting, and spending time with friends. These pursuits helped her cultivate a sense of identity outside of her past mistakes. As the months passed, Gina began to feel a sense of empowerment. She was no longer defined by her affair or her divorce. She was a woman who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. The journey of rebuilding her life was not without its challenges, but each step forward brought her closer to the future she envisioned for herself and her children. With a renewed sense of purpose, Gina embraced the possibilities that lay ahead, determined to create a life filled with love, laughter, and resilience. In the end, Gina's story became one of transformation. She learned that while the past could not be changed, the future was hers to shape. With each passing day, she moved closer to the life she desired, one built on the foundations of self-acceptance, hope, and the unwavering love she had for her children. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Gina was ready to face it head-on, armed with the lessons of her past and the strength of her newfound independence. Following the divorce from Gina, Greg found himself navigating a new chapter in his life, one that included a budding relationship with Kate, a colleague he had met shortly after the separation. Their connection began as a friendship, forged in the shared experience of working long hours at the marketing firm where they both were employed. Initially, Greg was hesitant to pursue anything romantic. He was still processing the emotional fallout from his marriage and the pain of betrayal. However, as time passed, he and Kate began to bond over their mutual interests and experiences, and what started as casual conversations gradually evolved into something deeper. The timeline of Greg and Kate's relationship post-D-Day unfolded over several months. They began spending more time together outside of work, attending social events and sharing meals. Greg appreciated Kate's understanding nature and her ability to listen without judgment. She provided a sense of comfort and companionship that he had been missing since the separation. By the 6-month mark after the divorce, their relationship had blossomed into a romantic one, marked by shared laughter and a growing emotional intimacy. Greg felt a sense of relief and happiness that he hadn't experienced in a long time, and he began to envision a future with Kate. However, the implications of Greg's new relationship were significant for Gina and their children. As Greg became more involved with Kate, he introduced her to their children, wanting to ensure that they felt comfortable with this new presence in their lives. While he believed he was doing the right thing by being open and honest, Gina felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. The thought of her children forming a bond with another woman was difficult to accept. She worried about how this new relationship would affect their family dynamics and whether it would create further emotional turmoil for the kids. For Gina, seeing Greg move on with Kate was a complex emotional experience. On one hand, she felt a sense of relief that he was finding happiness again. It was a sign that he was healing from the pain she had caused. On the other hand, it stirred up feelings of jealousy and insecurity. Gina grappled with the realization that Greg was building a new life without her, and the thought of him sharing moments with Kate that they had once shared as a couple was painful. The emotional complexities of this situation weighed heavily on her, and she often found herself reflecting on her own choices and the consequences they had wrought. As Greg and Kate's relationship progressed, Gina found it increasingly challenging to maintain a cordial co-parenting relationship. The presence of Kate in their lives added a layer of tension that had not existed before. Gina felt the need to establish boundaries, wanting to ensure that her children were not caught in the middle of any potential conflicts. She often had conversations with Greg about their parenting responsibilities, but the discussions were tinged with underlying resentment. The emotional scars from their past were still fresh, and the introduction of a new partner complicated their interactions. For the children, the transition was equally complex. They were excited to meet Kate, who was warm and engaging, but they also felt the weight of their parents' divorce. They often found themselves torn between their loyalty to Gina and their growing affection for Kate. Gina noticed that her children would sometimes express confusion about their feelings, and she made it a point to encourage open communication. She wanted them to feel safe discussing their emotions, even if it meant acknowledging their fondness for Kate. As the months turned into a year, the emotional landscape continued to shift. Gina worked hard to focus on her own healing and personal growth, but the sight of Greg and Kate together often triggered feelings of inadequacy. She would see them at school events or community gatherings, and the sight of them laughing together would stir up a mix of emotions: sadness, anger, and a longing for the past. It was a constant reminder of the life she had lost and the choices that had led her to this point. Despite the challenges, Gina also recognized that Greg's relationship with Kate was an opportunity for growth. She began to understand that their happiness did not diminish her worth or her role as a mother. In therapy, she explored these feelings, learning to separate her self-worth from her past mistakes. The journey was not easy, but it was necessary for her healing. Ultimately, Greg's relationship with Kate became a catalyst for Gina's transformation. While the emotional complexities of seeing Greg move on were difficult to navigate, they also pushed her to confront her own feelings and desires. As she continued to rebuild her life, Gina learned to embrace the changes around her, focusing on her children and her own happiness. The path ahead was still uncertain, but she was determined to find peace within herself, regardless of the dynamics of Greg's new relationship. In doing so, she hoped to create a stable and loving environment for her children, one that would allow them to thrive amidst the complexities of their family situation. Gina's story serves as a poignant exploration of the complexities of love, betrayal, and the consequences of infidelity. Throughout her journey, we have witnessed the profound impact of her choices, not only on her marriage with Greg, but also on their children and the broader community. The key takeaways from Gina's experiences highlight the far-reaching consequences of infidelity, emphasizing that such actions can lead to emotional turmoil, legal complications, and the unraveling of family bonds. One of the most significant lessons from Gina's story is the importance of communication and honesty in relationships. Infidelity often stems from unmet needs and a lack of connection, and Gina's journey illustrates how crucial it is to address issues within a partnership before they escalate. By fostering open dialogue and prioritizing emotional intimacy, couples can work together to navigate challenges and strengthen their bond. Gina's affair was not just a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a culmination of feelings of disconnection and longing for validation. This serves as a reminder that addressing underlying issues is vital for maintaining a healthy relationship. Additionally, Gina's experiences underscore the emotional fallout that accompanies infidelity. The pain of betrayal is not limited to the individuals directly involved. It extends to children, family, and friends. Gina's story illustrates how her choices affected her children, creating confusion and emotional distress as they navigated their parents' separation. This highlights the importance of considering the broader implications of our actions and the responsibility we have to those we love. As viewers reflect on Gina's journey, we encourage you to examine your own relationships and choices. Are there areas where communication could be improved? Are there unmet needs that require attention? Taking the time to reflect on these questions can lead to greater understanding and connection within your own partnerships. Relationships require ongoing effort and commitment, and being proactive in addressing issues can prevent the kind of heartache that Gina experienced. Moreover, Gina's story serves as a reminder of the power of resilience and personal growth. After the divorce, she faced numerous challenges, including co-parenting, navigating her new job, and dealing with the emotional complexities of her past. Yet, through it all, she demonstrated remarkable strength and determination to rebuild her life. Her journey emphasizes that while the consequences of our choices can be profound, there is always the potential for healing and transformation. As we conclude Gina's story, we invite you to consider the lessons learned and how they might apply to your own life. Infidelity can have devastating consequences, but it also offers an opportunity for reflection and growth. By prioritizing communication, understanding, and emotional connection, we can foster healthier relationships and avoid the pitfalls that lead to betrayal. If you found Gina's story impactful and thought-provoking, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel for more content that delves into the complexities of relationships and personal growth. By liking and sharing this video, you can help spread awareness about the importance of communication and the consequences of infidelity. Together, we can foster a community that values honesty, understanding, and resilience in the face of life's challenges. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Gina's experiences. We hope her story resonates with you and inspires you to reflect on your own relationships and choices. Remember, every relationship has its challenges, but with open communication and a commitment to growth, we can navigate those challenges and build stronger connections with the people we love. Stay tuned for more insightful content, and let's continue this conversation together.